What's up, everybody? Luke Cohen here. Let's talk about shadow projection, one of the most rampant elements of the collective process that we're working through right now. Shadow projection is something that exists in every community across the globe, in every culture, in every facet. And it's a primary coping mechanism of the human being. So what is shadow projection? Let's talk about shadow first. Shadow is our unresolved wounding. It's the feelings that we don't want to feel. It's the parts of ourselves that have been stuck in survival and coping mechanisms. And it's the part of our selves that we often can't see. We often need relationships, community, mentors, good friends to help us address our shadow in a way where we're consciously choosing to engage it. Obviously, a lot of the planet isn't choosing to consciously engage their shadow. In fact, most human beings are trying to avoid their shadow. A lot of spiritual practitioners are unconsciously or otherwise not doing their shadow work because it's not glamorous. It's confronting. It's addressing the trauma. It's getting into the thick stuff that's really uncomfortable, right? Obviously, there's rewards that come when we do that work. So that's shadow. Okay, so shadow is the unresolved expression of a collective wound of some sort. These things are not personal. We can personalize them, but every single human being on the planet has their slice of the sacred wound. They have their unique set of emotions and ancestral pain, all of it, right? So everyone has a shadow, basically. Everyone has their shadow, and the degrees in which we resolve our shadow are the degrees where we can actually let more light through us. We can claim more of our gifts. So there's an importance of doing shadow work. That's a whole other video. So that's shadow. Shadow projection happens when we perceive someone outside of ourselves as a type of threat where they become symbolic because their very existence pokes, addresses, confronts, stimulates that unresolved shadow in the other. So shadow projection is when the very style of wound or the very thing that the other is doing that hasn't been consciously acknowledged in self, then that person is then demonized, made wrong, is perceived as an enemy. It's the intensity of the disconnect from one's own shadow material that's being exemplified, then it gets completely projected onto them, right? So there's varying degrees of this. So there's a whole spectrum of shadow projection and how it plays out. But that's sort of the primary aspect. So an example of this is, say, on a national level, between national leaders, and one is like making that other person completely wrong and evil and bad, but this person has they have the same qualities. Ultimately, they have the same kind of qualities, right? A version of it is, especially like there's actually indigenous teachings around this too, that tie into the frequency or the mythology of the Wediko, which is a sort of a greedy energy, which is a kind of a hungry ghost. It's never hungry ghost. It's never fully fed. It's never fully satiated. It's like a spiritual sickness. And there's a lot of styles of shadow projection that live inside of that because there's a refusal to deal with one's own shadow material. And in that style of shadow projection, literally the other person is perceived as evil. Or really bad, at minimum, but like evil. They're considered so threatening and wrong that it actually justifies the person to do some of the most outlandish or cruel or justifiably toxic things. So in the spiritual community, obviously, there's a version of that happens where people get ostracized or condemned, or that person's this and they're that, and there's all this venom that goes. And very often the person, and this is not in cases of abuse, or this is just on a emotional, energetic level. It's not we're not talking about people causing actual harm, right? That's a different scenario. So I want to just differentiate like actual abuse versus when someone's mirroring a shadow, and that shadow projection is being put on that person. very often that the person that's triggering the person's shadow projection is exemplifying qualities of a dominant parent, or it doesn't even have to be that they're playing out a similar energetic signature that their dominant parent or primary parent that wounded them has. That's one version of it in relationships when there's strong shadow projection. And in shadow projection, it's impossible to take self-ownership. It's all about the other. It all becomes about blame. It's all about them and everything that they're doing, and there's no personal accountability whatsoever. That's when we know someone's in shadow projection, when there's absolutely no accountability, when they're just a mirror to the wound. And the other version of it is one version is they're displaying or exemplifying or embodying similar energetic signature to like a dominant parent or someone who wounded them in their past, or they're displaying the shadow qualities that they have that they cannot accept or haven't accessed or are unwilling to acknowledge in themselves, and so they condemn. So just driving that point home a little bit. So how that plays out in the blame and the shame and the lack of ownership is the irony often, especially in, I'm going to speak the spiritual community or personal growth communities, the irony of that person that's mirroring this shadow is often so vilified that the person feels justified to bring often more toxicity than the person ever even did to warrant. And they feel, when someone's shadow projecting, they feel fully justified, often righteously, for why they can be absolutely toxic, cruel, dismissive, all the different strategies we can do to condemn another human being, right? And this is a global phenomenon. This is why we see such duality in our world right now. We see such a split in political arenas, all these things, because the unresolved shadow in humanity is coming up. It's coming up to be seen. The trauma, the wounds. It needs the soul. It needs the light of consciousness to actually perceive it and see it. And a lot of healer types, a lot of sensitive souls, a lot of, if you want to call them light workers, a lot of these terms I don't really fully resonate with anymore, and so bear with me. But people that are committed to doing their inner work, let's just say that, often when they cross a certain threshold in their journey, they can become the object of transference. They can become the target of a lot of shadow projection because their light is touching and illuminating the unresolved pain in others. And this is something that I've personally experienced a lot in my life, and a lot of other people I know that do this similar types of work have, and a lot of sensitive souls have, because even growing up in a household, when you're the older soul, or you're the empath, or you're the sensitive person, your innocence and purity and love is confronting to the adult contrived world. Think about a little kid that's pointing out something really obvious, speaking right to the subtleness of it, and the parents get triggered and they like jab the little one or shame the little one. So a lot of people have just experienced this their whole life, and they're clamped. So as people free themselves and they bring more and more of their soul through, their light through, it's very likely that they will attract more shadow projection from people at varying stages in their personal development around them. It's just part of it, and it's happening on a global level with political leaders. It's happening intertribally, the projection of evil on the other tribe, like some of these intertribal, like Palestine and Israel. You can see the same perception of evil or wrongdoing on either side. It's very hard to resolve it until there's actually full ownership on both sides, right? So this is a very charged example. Peace and love to everyone out there. If you want to come at me for that one, so be it, but just, it's an example where there's maybe some messed up stuff happening from both sides, and there's something to look at, whatever it is, whatever percentage. And this is the thing. It doesn't have to be 50-50. It can be 10% of ownership that one can take. Oh, wow, this is the 10% of my shadow involved in this person. 90% of the shadow projection is coming at me, but there's this 10% that I get to claim, own, look at, be with, and that actually helps me upgrade and integrate and evolve, right? So again, this is a very unconscious thing that people do as a survival mechanism, and learning to be aware of this process in the collective, learning to be aware that's in your own journey, being aware that's in others. It requires a tremendous amount of compassion. It really does, because the viciousness and the attack that can come at someone, that's the object of that transference of the unconscious or subconscious wound on other, and then justifying the attack, requires a really deep attunement to the other person's pain. And often, once someone is the subject of shadow projection, they get on the defense. And this is how we go through this samsaric cycle of victim, perpetrator, hero, and just playing through that whole scenario. So we're the collective consciousness of humanity is having the opportunity to break that cycle, and we do it through self-ownership. We do it through claiming the wounds, through claiming our shadows fully, finding whatever percentage of our shadow material is manifesting this experience. And yeah, just really orienting in a deep compassion for, wow, like when someone's doing that, they're in pain. It's actually the emotional material that is so intense to be with that they have to be in blame. It's like a safety mechanism, because the material is too much to handle. And so this is where we can start to have compassion for this process in the collective. And this compassion is really important. A lot of you that are tuning into this video are specifically here because of your compassion as a soul. You're on earth right now for this transition to hold a field of love and compassion. And whether you're, on a spiritual journey, or you're on a self-healing journey, or you're personal growth, on a mission-driven journey, this will help you understand certain dynamics at a deeper level. So I hope this resonated with you. Like, comment, share, connect, subscribe, all the things. I love you guys, and I'm looking forward to seeing you soon.